Hi, I'm Mark Anthony Tierno, author of Maldene, Cyberdong, and more. And today I thought I'd give you bit of a peek between the covers of the sort of details that I tend to put into my novels. Now, every author, particularly of any good multi-book series, they're going to have a certain amount of background details, information on the world and stuff that you'll see in there. I quite possibly go to excessive lengths on that. If you read the first two Maldene books, you know that there's some appendices in the back. Like the alphabet, the dictionary, the calendar, things like that. But that's pretty much tip of the iceberg. Every Maldene book, all 13 of them, each book are always add in a couple new appendices, depending on the book. Those appendices actually come from my world book. This is the typed up version. For many a year, I actually had it as a bunch of handwritten notes taking up an inch thick folder and of randomly strewn papers. But there's many notes that I have of things you'll see in the first two books, things that won't come along until the future books. Things on various societies, cults, different aspects of the culture, the world itself, etc. So today I thought I'd just go through a few of them and give you a little bit of a preview. For instance, there's a couple outfits. There's one called the Weapon Masters of Culture. Now, Culture is an island built like a fort, and Weapon Master, they aren't just really good fighters. Each Weapon Master has one specific type of weapon that he has been training for his entire life. So it isn't always all Weapon Masters always have the same sort of sword. No, some of them could have, for instance, a pair of nunchucks, or a staff, or different types of swords. But whatever it is, the one to qualify him as being a weapon master of culture is that whatever weapon he's chosen, that's the only weapon. And to symbolize their expertise, they each have a tattoo on the shoulder. The tattoo, it could be on the lowest ranking a single sword, two swords, first lance, second lance, silver master, and gold. Helpful hint: never mess with the gold masters. And the thing about these tattoos is they're carved into the shoulder with a knife. And they're actually, in the story, there's a weapon master that comes along around book 7, we see him. And for those few in the know, just seeing that sort of tattoo on a guy's shoulder is usually enough to get the opponents fleeing. If you want, you can pitch it in sort of like the Jedi, but it isn't all the same sword, and the only code that they have is basically to their craft. It's more of a warrior's code. Another little outfit is a fun-loving bunch known as the Order of the Dark Monks. Now, we first see them around book 9 and a couple of times after that. Basically, picture an order of martial arts fighting monks that are also really nasty necromancers, and in some cases pretty much undead. Each sect of the Order of the Dark Monks is devoted to a different dark god. uh, and they usually try to keep their presence somewhat secret because it's not anything that the public likes. Some sects of the Order of the Dark Monks might worship one evil deity or another. Some might go and worship a demonic power. It actually varies, but they become a bit troublesome. You'll also hear mention, starting in the second book, of the secret school. Now, these things called noyons. A noyon, which name, by the way, literally means exploding death, is sort of like a spellcasting ninja. So you take a ninja, make him really secretive, and to teach him not only just, say, the magics of illusion or whatever else, but how to use them to best effect in the given circumstance. So it could be a simple little spell that any wizard would know, but in the context of how a noyon would use it, it makes them seem like phantoms. How did they get into the room to kill the guy? How did they get out through a locked door? That sort of thing. The ones that become master of this, you see in the beginning of the first two books, the Black Dagger. In fact, you see Black Dagger's training sessions, a few scenes for that in the second book. And that ends with their noyon training master being the only one that's actually figured out who the Black Dagger is. But to keep their noyons secret, actually ends up offing himself. Dissolved to a puddle of goo, that sort of thing. Voluntarily, proud in the knowing of he's the one that brought the terror of the Black Dagger in the world. But that gives you an idea of that. Noyons. I got a small list over here on the side. Oh yes, a few places. There's Cassandra's Grove, you see in the first book, and also in the second. Cassandra was a walker of dimensions, and she found this sort of next spatially and dimensionally closest world of Devon, and actually pulled a few dimensional strands and made a dimensional path to make it easier on getting there and back. And so her path survived. She did not, because if you've read through the first book, over in Devon is a little guy called the Dragon Lord. And that didn't end well for her, and that was a few centuries back. And the remnants of her path have been there ever since. Odd thing about what she used to create her path, and this actually, there's some backstory to it that comes out in the two-book prequel. Yes, after all 13 books, I have a 2-book prequel. And stories in the prequel go back to literally the beginning of time, where on my timeline I have from here back there be space dust. And you actually see the construction, or the creation of this sort of accidental spatial link between the two that she actually makes use of. In that same vein, there's something called the Cave of Dimensions. Now, the Cave of Dimensions can appear pretty much anywhere. You go into the cave, and it has all these different branching avenues and stuff, and you could come out anywhere across the world, or in other dimensions, like, say, you make a wrong turn and come out in the elemental plane of fire, or another wrong turn, and you're coming out someplace deep in the demonic abyss. Problem is, the avenues in the Cave of Dimensions shift. So you can make that left turn, it's not going where you want, you go back to where you came, and the path isn't the same, because it's already changed around. So the Cave of Dimensions, it does actually come up a few times in the books. I think the first time is book 5, and a couple scattered times thereafter. I like using it whenever possible. I have a few other places like that. There's a place called the Wood of the Worlds that I haven't yet had an excuse to use. It's basically a natural focal point for woodland type magics, and the Wood of the Worlds is another one that has no fixed locations. Of the continents, of the running gag is the Farlands. That's stuck way up there in the corner of the world, and the whole joke is the only inhabitants it has are descendants of old shipwrecked sailors, and that a major artifact on there would be considered a crossbow. So all anyone ever wants to do on the Farlands is to get the heck out of there. It's like the Kansas of Maldene. Interesting thing about that is back in the creation of the world, back in the times of the olden gods, now long gone, you find out that one of the olden gods basically created the Farlands as sort of a vacation spot. If the poor mortals want to get away, let them go to the Farlands. And now it's a running gag. And while we're at it, yes, there are the olden gods. Big, powerful entities, of which the only one left is Vold, who we see from the get-go on book 1, and goes all the way through the first 6 books, with a few guest appearances later on. But there were actually a number of olden gods. Vold is the one known to be left. But the actual story, the mythology of the olden gods is told by a character named Kivor in book 5, because his teacher taught him, and I won't say who his teacher is because that's another plot spoiler. But he tells a group of characters the mythology of the the olden gods, and that actually comes out as being somewhat important in the plot. So I'll just leave it at that. A few little things I've come up with that add in there, if I can find the right page. Yes, I came up with among other things, my own Maldene Zodiac, and that makes an appearance in the appendices. And I'm trying to find the page for there is a Maldene Tarot. Here it is. And the Maldene Tarot, I don't have the cards specifically drawn up because I'm not an artist, but I do have them well described, their meanings and everything else. And in fact, I have one appendix where it actually shows how to lay them out. You know, in actual Earth Tarot, you have the old Celtic cross, and here you have, on the simple reading, a hexagon. Each card marked for what it's supposed to represent, and the more complex reading is these interlocked system of 3 hexagons. And whereas on Earth you have lesser and greater arcana, on Maldene you have 3 arcana. There's also a high arcana, which consists of 3 cards, sun, moon, and the world. And the cards, I should mention, are triangular shaped, so they each card can have 3 different shades of meaning depending which side of the card is up. And I actually have the full appendix for that in book 11, because there is a character that you see in the background since like book 1, but the backstory is really in book 11. And among other things, she uses tarot cards. So I mentioned the story, the names of the cards that she might be using, how she's laying them out, etc. So I stuck the appendix in there in book 11. So yeah, that is another level of detail I have. If there's an artist out there that wants to draw them up, I got all the information to run off a complete set of cards. Um, all worlds have storms. I came up with my own different types of storms. For instance, there's a funnel storm, which, if you combine all the worst features of a hurricane and a tornado, you pretty much got that. You got the winds blowing in from 10 miles away to the core, which is a cylindrical funnel, the border which has lightning everywhere and everything. But the winds in the funnel blow straight up. So it blows straight up into the stratosphere, someplace in the atmosphere, and then blows out and away and down to come down several miles away and blow inward again. So it's like one big cycle. And if this thing, it's always found around the equator, over the ocean, and that's when you find out why they have ships like a Sleem, which is really long and extra wide in comparison to its depth and its length, because it has to survive seas with 3 moons that have things like funnel storms. And when you see them appear over in a desert, it's pretty much like walking through a cement mixer. There's also a thing called a harrow wind. Take a tornado lying on its side and have it coming down like a fjord or other narrow pass, and that's pretty much a harrow wind. You'll see it moving along. You get sucked into one end and spat out the other end pretty much as a bunch of confetti. So it's a very terrain-specific storm. And there's a Hisu storm, which has it's more of a nasty long-term thing. With you can have moisture trapped in the atmosphere during the day as the heat builds up, and like super dry, and then at night all of a sudden all the moisture takes a complete dump, and raining all night. And there's actually a couple different variations of the Hisu storm. And hurricane, you basically have like a hurricane with a whole mess of electricity. And so all these storms I came up with as different weather patterns to throw in additional flavor. When I was going over initially, I decided, well, given the conditions of how big this world is and it has 3 moons, these nasty storms are kind of possible. So I stick them in there. That's part of the whole background stuff I was developing during the years before I even began writing the book. Just because, well, at the time I was going through college, and in between getting my homework done, you get a bit bored on the bus trip back home, and so you start coming up with random stuff like this. Oh, if anybody's curious, this is my own private Maldene timeline. It includes a lot of things in the books, some things not in the books that may or may not end up in there in any future sequels. Some of the stuff you do see in the prequels. Now, early on you may have noticed, of course, there are different human species. Like on Earth, we have white, black, brown, yellow, red. On Maldene, I have those and a few more. For instance, I have, I believe, about 2 or 3 different black races. Sabu's white race, generic white race, is known as Katoan. Your generic Oriental race is Silene. That combines the whole thing of Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and I just stick them all in the same place. And of course, each race has their own language. In the case of Katoans, they speak Selgish, which is one of the more popular languages. Silenes speak Silish. And there's several other races, including the Butar. They're white, but a light bluish tinge to their skin. and also bluish tinge to their hair. And they inhabit, for the most part, a small continent known as Norland. And that's way up north by the Arctic Circle. And in fact, the North Pole is just a short hop across the way. And you actually do see a few Butar here and there. Two specific Butar characters, Frogren and Grayan, you see in book 4. And theirs is, well, a rather interesting story. There's also an exceedingly rare gold skin race known as the Vina. Now, there's one particular place where the Vina are found, and you'll see the primitive ones in the jungles, and then the others. One Vina in particular you will see pretty much on day 1 of the first book, hiding there in the background. So if you see a gold-skinned humanoid, watch out. That's a major plot thing. And of course, each of these different races has their own language. The Vina speak Japong, Destir speak Kantese or Despeak. Tadalka are the mountain men. Basically, you have Destir are masters of the desert, Tadalka masters of the mountains, and Therdosians masters of the sea. And each has their own particular abilities that set them off as being a normal human. And of course, their own separate language. And in fact, here's the language chart, and I even have a language tree. This appears in one of the appendices that you'll see. Trade speak, by the way, that's basically my euphemism for common tongue. I figure it's derived from Selgish and some other things, so it's actually a mishmash of all the other languages, taken up by necessity from having to trade through a couple hundred different cultures scattered around the world. Especially when you're in a place like Harbor the World, which of the visual I use for that is Picture Harbor the size of the Gulf of Mexico, and the inlet going in is about the distance between the tip of Florida and Cuba. And it's all one big coastal spanning sea of stone buildings. And the buildings there can get to like about 4 stories. And of course you have dozens of different cultures from around the world intersecting this place. So that's why you had something like trade speak that eventually had to develop, because there's all this constant trade going back and forth across the harbor. And it's situated in a tropical area. A couple other language trees too. I have one for all the fairy tongues and the earthen tongues and demonic tongues. Some of this you see, some of this you might see in vague passing. Trying to see if there's anything else of interest you might find. Well, the point is, and I even have information on the entire solar system done out, the other worlds of Maldene, or of the same star system as Maldene, which you do start seeing around book 9, a couple of them, maybe book 10. The point is that this is all information again in here that I did up as background to make for as complete a world as I can. And I have more information down in this little notebook and also in other sources than will probably ever appear in the world of Maldene. But I'd rather have too much than not enough. And some of it is stuff that I can pull from for like hints and brief passing mention. Like, again, if they happen to mention about the secret school. And as I mentioned too, that's where some Noyons get their training, and that's about all you hear about it. But it is there. It isn't just a random thing I came up with on the spur of the moment. I had everything in this notebook done up before I began writing the series. So there are no accidental mentions on anything. That's about all I can think of anything here in my... the mythology of the olden gods would be something for another day or another book. But so next time you read my books or read anybody's books, and you begin to wonder how much detail comes out from all the stuff you're reading, all the background of the world, I don't know about anybody else, but I like to be rather thorough. And like I said, I got everything mapped out from space dust on forward to present time. I got epics, eras mapped out that are sometimes given in brief mention. But I do have all the info on them. Like there's a dwarf from back in history that you'll hear mentioned called Arkdale Horlim. And he was ruler of the Dwarven Empire on like 3 different continents for a while. And he's actually mentioned a few times, and at one point in book 4 you actually do see his tomb. But so things like that, I actually have more information on that than you'll see. I know there's some books out there where the guy makes pretty much a random name and puts it in there and doesn't have any thought after that. But if you're going to write a good book, you should put some thought into some of those random elements there that you'll see later on. Anyhow, that's it for now. You know where to find me. Keep reading.